While stakeholder attitude and the context behind it might be one of the most important characteristics to consider, there are, of course, others we should have in mind as well when planning business analysis. Among these include stakeholder culture. Age, heritage, and group norms may impact how stakeholders fulfill their responsibilities or work with others, how they help in decision-making processes, or how they understand our communications. For example, if we've got employees working at an offshore office, perhaps English is not their primary language, and they have some difficulty understanding communications if they are written or given in a certain way. Just the same, some of the subtleties that might be possible in person if speaking with someone verbally face-to-face might not be conveyed in an email or even in the conversation over the phone. Understanding that and having that guide the way that we conduct our elicitation of requirements from stakeholders can be very helpful. How they operate within power structures and how they manage conflicts is important as well. If we know that certain stakeholders are resistant to speak with outsiders because they're simply suspicious of what the implications might be for their job, we need to do what we can to put them at ease so that we can get an honest opinion from them regarding the topic at hand. Just the same, if we know that there are many conflicting opinions or different viewpoints where passions might run high regarding something that we're investigating, the prioritization of requirements or what those requirements might be, then we need to be cognizant of that and find ways to help manage that conflict and help everyone work toward a common goal. Stakeholder experience is also an important trait to consider. How much prior experience does each stakeholder or does each group of stakeholders, based on the way that we are describing and classifying them, have? How much experience do they have within the organization, within the department, within this particular subject area? The answers to each of these as they change might indicate how valuable their information and input might be to our process. In some cases, only those with a great amount of experience will be truly valuable in the way that we solicit their input. In others, we may want someone who is very new to the organization or subject area because it allows us to treat them as a fresh face and have them look at a possibility for the very first time without any of the bias that comes from years of experience working a certain way. Do they have any prior experience participating in elicitation activities? It could be that they're very good at their job and very knowledgeable, but don't really know how to conduct themselves in interviews or don't offer up information proactively. Instead, the onus is then on us to investigate the issue and find the right questions to ask. In other cases, some stakeholders might share too much, in which case we have to separate signal from noise and make sure that we capture all of the most valuable information that they share. In speaking with stakeholders, do we find that there's generally an equivalent amount of experience across all of our different requirements areas? Or are there certain areas where we might be deficient? For example, we might have a very good idea of how to market a solution or how to deploy it from a human resources point of view, but we might be weak from a technical aspect. We know what we want to do and what the benefits will be and how to get there at a high level, but not necessarily how to implement it. In that case, can missing experience be supplemented? Perhaps we need to bring in a subject matter expert or an outside consultant who we can work with to better understand what the technical requirements and the specifics of our project might need to be in order to meet those business needs. Geospatial factors should be considered when analyzing stakeholders as well. Where stakeholders may be located and when they might be available to us impacts our elicitation efforts greatly. It can dictate what types of elicitation they are able to take part in, be it as simple as something asymmetric like a survey, or something real-time like a video conference, or even better, being able to get them in the same room for a focus group or a one-on-one interview of some sort. Different stakeholders may require these different types of communication mediums based on their location and when and where they are available. This is especially critical when attempting to group stakeholders for elicitation activities, because if we are intending to have all of a certain type of stakeholder at a focus group, and there are certain ones who simply can't be there because they work in an office several time zones away, then we need to accommodate that and find a way to gather their feedback and thoughts in an equally valuable fashion. The time estimates that we can come up with for how long our business analysis process will take will vary widely depending on these geospatial factors. If we could have all of the work done in 3 days, if we had unlimited access to all of the different employees and stakeholders we needed, then it might still take 3 or 4 weeks if it requires us to wait a long time before we can speak with each of these different stakeholders. In some cases, maybe our analysis could be completed in just a few days if we had unlimited real-time access to stakeholders. However, since analysis is rarely that easy, we typically have to accommodate many differing schedules. And what might have taken just 3 or 4 days in an optimal scenario might take 3 or 4 weeks based on the real-world realities of the organization we're operating in. The frequency and form of our communications with stakeholders should be optimized with these factors in mind. If it's difficult for us to get everyone together in the same room, we had better make it worthwhile if we are able to, because it's unlikely that's going to happen again. On the other hand, if there are certain things that we can deal with immediately by sending out a quick communication or a quick online survey, some sort of method for them to give us feedback on an asymmetric basis whenever they have a moment, then we should absolutely capitalize on that as well. Group complexity is another factor to consider. There are many different potential sources for group complexity to emerge, where we are no longer able to easily consider all of our stakeholders to be the same from a planning perspective. The size of the group clearly leads to this, because in any large group, we're often going to see more factions of different opinions that have strong viewpoints. We can also see disparate stakeholder needs lead to this, where stakeholders all agree that something needs to be done, but based on their perspective and opinion, it should be very different than what the next person you speak with might think. The spread of the project's impact is important here, as is the variance in project impact. In other words, how many people are potentially impacted by either our analysis, the project, or its final result, and to what degree is this impact the same? Is it low impact for everyone? Are certain people very heavily impacted and other groups not so much? We have to keep this in mind when we group our stakeholders. Points of interaction with outsiders is another potential area that could lead to complexity. We might need to consider what the needs and preferences of those outsiders are, or at least those within the organization that have to interact with them. The call center scenario from a moment ago is an example of this, where the perceived needs of the frontline employees manning the phones were very different from those of executives who were several layers abstracted from those phone calls. Finally, the technical landscape can also dictate what kind of complexity exists. If a solution is highly technical in nature, it means that it's probably going to impact several different platforms or systems, which leads to larger groups of stakeholders and more perspectives that need to be considered regarding the solution. Understanding this kind of group complexity leads us to better planning of our elicitation sessions, so that we can structure them in ways that can optimize and maximize the amount of information, valuable information, that we can get from stakeholders. It can help us to shape what questions we ask, how we ask them, who we include in the sessions, and so on. It also allows us to create more appropriate requirements documentation that's tailored to these different groups of stakeholders so that they can understand what we are seeking to accomplish and the value to them. Finally, it'll also give us a better idea of what level of formality and detail is going to be required from our business analysis. The more complex groups are, typically the more formal we might want our final plans to be, so that they include the level of granularity needed to cover each topic that each of those disparate groups cares about most.